So you've taken all this experience and that you continue to add to, and you've got this company called John Crow Films. What is John Crow Films?
We're actually John Crow Creative now.
Okay.
John Crow Films we used for our first short called Don't Go Home She Knows. It was $1,200. We made it under the moniker of John Crow Films. We put it out. It's actually been in international streaming for like 8 years. Since we made it, it's been in international streaming. I'll actually send you a link to it so you can check it out yourself.
Thank you.
We became John Crow Creative because we saw ourselves less as a production company and more as an ideation bank. You know what I mean? We want to get into the ownership of IP rather than the physical nuts and bolts of production. I have no technical skill. I'm not going to lie. I'm not even going to pretend. I have very rudimentary understanding of a lot of the film stuff, but the most important thing that I've learned that's actually served me very well is find somebody who does. And my production partner, Tori Rogers, he has a company called Ratio Pictures, who we partnered with on The Duppy Man's Walk. And he's been my partner from the very beginning since I started here. But he does that. That's his world, cameras, technical expertise, all that. My idea is the ideation, the production scheduling, production management, and that type of thing. So I wanted to put myself in a position where I could help other people ideate and develop IP. And that's where John Crow Creative came from. And I let Tori now handle all the technical and production assets, the line crew production or the line production where he crews up, and because he's got teams and equipment. So I've kind of carved out what creative space I want to work in rather than trying to do too much simply because I want to produce something like a less is
Gotcha.
more deal. You know, I can focus on what my skills lend to rather than trying to be out there in the world doing things that take me away from it. But
Okay.
John Crow Creative is the new John Crow Films. And basically, what we do is ideate, develop, and hopefully create spec work that we can then go try to either bring to people to scale up into features and series, or simply just work with people that need help as a consultant.
So the John Crow part of the name, where does that come from?
So, John Crow comes from the Caribbean. You know those big turkey vultures?
Yeah.
In the Jamaica, in the Caribbean, they're called John Crows. So a John Crow, to me, what I took from the John Crow is if you see a buzzard, the first connotations that come to mind are negative. Oh my God, look at that buzzard eating that dead flesh over there. But the truth is that buzzard keeps the ecosystem healthy. That buzzard is something that without its presence, the balance falls out of place. And that's what the idea around the type of stories that we want to tell comes from. And that's why I adopted John Crow, is because we don't all get a chance to tell our stories because people see little value in them sometimes. But we're going to continue telling these types of stories because without these stories in the ecosystem of the types of narratives that we get, we don't get the balance that we need. And that's why I kind of adopted the John Crow as John Crow Creative, because your story might not be what's selling or what's been requested or what's being asked for, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have value. And those are the types of stories that we want to tell. I'm not a big fan of superhero stuff because I think it devalues the human experience. You know what I mean? It kind of curtails the value we see in each other because none of us are superheroes, but we all want to pretend. You know what I mean? And John Crow is kind of the opposite of that, where we want to tell stories that have deeply rooted, what's a good word? I don't know.
Authentically sourced?
That too, because we want to tell the lesser known powerful stories. You know what I mean? Like, well, there's a lot of rehashing: boy beats girl, boy loses girl, blah 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 blah.
Yep.
I want to hear stuff different than that. I want to step outside Plato's dramatics and actually tell story of people don't know they want to hear. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want that buzzard in your yard, but if you see him out there eating something, you know he's doing something for you. It's like those mosquito hawks. Nobody really wants them floating around their house, but if they're keeping mosquitoes away, you know, leave it be. And that's kind of where John Crow Creative came from, is just the idea that you might not like what you're seeing, but these things are important for balance. And we don't necessarily tell stories people don't want to see or hear. We just go about deciding on what we choose to invest our time developing and ideating with that mentality in mind.
And I'm glad you've got that as a goal, because one thing that I know I'm not the only person who's noticed this is that since at the latest, the mid aughts, it seemed as though new stories started drying up in cinema. Hollywood was putting out fewer and fewer things that were different outside of a mold. They wanted safe, they wanted predictable, they wanted an algorithm to design
Yes.
everything for them. But I remember when me and my brother in the 90s and early aughts, we'd go hit up the movie theater all the time for all kinds of off the wall movies, and like The Secretary. So that's not a usual movie. You know, Maggie Gyllenhaal getting caned over a desk, that's something different. And there was all kinds of experimental stuff going on then, and they were lower budget, and that's fine. You don't need a big budget to do everything. But it seems like there's not much to go around for that kind of movie these days. And Hollywood's experiencing the pain of that because they've
Yeah.
been too reliant on the stuff you're talking about, the big plastic fantastic movies that they think are going to make $1 billion a hit. And
Right.
a few of them might, but not all of them are. And then you get a blast from the past like Top Gun Maverick that does make $1 billion because it's something we haven't seen in a long time.
Right.
And that was one of the things that we talked about when you were kind enough to come down to Mobile for the film festival and give that talk, is that I appreciated you for doing it, and you were glad I appreciated you for doing it, of telling a different story.
Yeah.
You were telling an original story, and it
You
was so
know,
glad to see.
that is the thing that I am most disappointed with about where the film industry is still headed, because the studios don't have any plans on changing. And when you say algorithm, you hit it on the head. That's why AI, they're so desperately waiting the onset of AI. When you and I used to go to the movies, there was always something creative, groundbreaking, original, you know. But what Hollywood has come to understand, especially with like soaring production costs, they don't want creativity anymore. What they want is reliability. So Hollywood's thing is, give me what I know is a hit already, but different. So that's kind of the lane that they've decided to go down. But to them, it means more sequels. It means more prequels. It means more reinvention of old properties that they're bringing back to life. Like, I love Ghostbusters, but I don't need another one.
I
You know
don't.
what I mean?
I
I don't
don't.
need another one. I
And
love The Color Purple, but whoever said it should be a musical, they need to be caned. Because first of all, Alice Walker would roll over in her grave if she heard people singing. You know, I mean, that's just my opinion. Don't send me letters. I'm just saying. But like, some of it is just, it's in bad taste, you know. They've stopped looking at us as an outlet for their creative endeavors, and they just see us as a pile of money. And they don't necessarily have to satiate our desire for the willful suspension of disbelief. They just got to give us product. And that's the
yeah,
thing that it's aggravating.
yeah.
It's aggravating.
Me and my wife, I'm fortunate to be married to a lady who's maybe more versed in movies than I am. And that's saying something. But we like to go to the movies, and we like physical theaters. We like the experience. We want to keep that going. We bought
Yeah.
some of those AMC shares, and I periodically buy more because I believe in them as a company, and that they do great things. The cinematic experience is important. It helped form us as who we are. But I tell you what, when I'm sitting in the previews and I see another trailer for another possessed nun movie, I'd tell her, another possessed nun movie, like another evil nun. Ooh, another one. How can we do that? Come on, possess somebody else. Possess,
Right.
do another possessed dog. I mean, like Cujo, that was original, right? Do something
That was
different.
it.
Just
Yeah.
not another nun.
I agree.
For those watching, if you do want to send Greg hate mail, you have my permission, but you need to put a check in there too.
Yeah.
And the four line is the production of the Duppy Man Walks,
Very good.
feature film. So feel free to badmouth them, but you pay for the privilege. That's all I'm saying.
Hate on me. Hate on me. I need hate in my life right now.
So you've directed three short films so far: Adele Gum, Don't Go Home, She Knows, and Duppy Man's Walk. Duppy Man's Walk, I saw at the film festival. I enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find where to watch the other two. So I just got to ask you for more information about that, because I'm curious to see what it is you've been working on. Have you only directed three at this point, or were there some more that IMDb missed?
So The Delgum was a 48-hour film project that a friend of mine asked me to direct for their team. Don't Go Home, She Knows was a John Crow Films project. Same thing pretty much with The Duffy Man's Walk, but there's another one called The Annunciation, which never made it to distribution. And that's basically a Christmas story about a guy that wakes up after a bender on Christmas Eve and he's got a baby in his house. And it was kind of a comedy, but we had a lot of issues around the use of the minor, and the editor was the minor's father, and he didn't kind of like the way it came out, so it never made it to air.
Oh man. Yeah. You want to err on the side of caution when
Oh,
that comes up,
absolutely,
don't you?
absolutely. You know, that was before my student film, so that literally was the very first thing I ever made, and it's not that great, but it was the foundation of the team that we ultimately put together that has been a part of all the other shorts that we've done. And now who are my partner Tori and a couple of other heads involved are the ones driving the feature project.
So unfortunately, was it renunciation? Is that what you said it was?
The Annunciation, like you remember the picture of the Annunciation of Christ with the beam coming down, and we called it the Annunciation because it was a Christmas movie about a baby.
Gotcha. Okay. So while I get where we might not ever get to see it because of, parent-child issues, and I respect that, is the script something you might ever release so people could take a look at it?
You know, we didn't have a script. Um, it
Well,
was
that
it was
answers that question.
it was more of a camera exercise than anything. I wanted to see if I could put into practice the things that I had learned about depth of field, use of thirds, things like that, using the camera as an instrument, even though I wasn't operating the camera. But I wanted to, a lot of what I do is proving to myself that I'm not a fraud. You know what I mean? It's kind of bit by bit. Education without practical application of it is useless, right? So really what I wanted to do was just see if I could work with the DP in a way that was compelling visually. So the script was pretty bare bones. It was just me and a couple of my friends, one of which was a stand-up comedian, and he was kind of protagonist of it. So there was a lot of freestyling. I purposely kept it as minimalist as possible with dialogue because I wanted it to be about the visuals and trying to see if I could use them. That's really what it was. It was, I think there's probably like 20 lines of dialogue in the whole thing. And even in Don't Go Home, She Knows, I think there's maybe like 60 pieces of dialogue because people kept telling me your story should be able to move without the use of dialogue. So that's what I was kind of working on at that point.
So it was more of a technology test rehearsal kind of situation as opposed to a real short film that you intended to make to pour your heart into this work of art
Right, right.
situation. Okay. And that is a valuable use of your time. Folks at home, if you're doing something important, rehearse it, dry run it. It will help you work out the kinks down the line. I do it all the time because in my day job, I do a lot of instruction. And when I've got my material prepared, I rehearse it for somebody before I deliver it to 700 people. And it always helps.
It was a learning experience, you know,
Yeah.
and again, just proving to myself this is something that you can do.
So the Delgom, that was, you said, a 48-hour film festival challenge. And what's it like being in one of those? I've heard it's a meat grinder. You don't get much sleep, stuff like that.
It was fun for me. So one of the young ladies that was a GFA student along with me, she and a friend of hers came out to help us make the Annunciation. So after the Annunciation and that film experience, they joined the 48-hour film thing, and she wanted me to come be her first AD, the person that actually kind of keeps the production moving. But when I got there, she was like, I don't think I can do this. Why don't you go ahead and direct? So I didn't have any input in the script. There are certain things that you have to use. Like you have a category, and then they give you like certain things that you have to have in it. So I didn't have anything really to do with it. I got there, I spent a little bit of time reading the script, and then Tori, he and I just kind of winged it. But it actually turned out it wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't bad at all. The young lady that actually owns the rights to it, she's decided not to put it into release, but I have it as well. No, it was fun. It was kind of a challenge because you got 48 hours. And if you think about it, that's only a day to shoot and then a day for post. Now, we had some benefits. There was a company here called Georgia Crickets who lent us their facility. One of their team members, this is her business. And she was like, it'll be cool if we just shot it at my place. It was a big warehouse, bunch of insects and all kind of stuff like that. But we had a sci-fi theme. So basically, the Delgum is a time machine and these people come back from a future to the cricket house, and from a future where there's famine and in the future, and they want to bring back crickets because they're a good source of protein. So that was kind of the premise of the script. It was a comedy. We had a boa constrictor, we had a horse, we had a bunch of crickets, we had time travelers. It was actually pretty fun. It was a lot of fun. It came out way better than I imagined.
That's good. And films, whether they're short or feature length, for me to enjoy them, they don't have to be perfect technically, and they could have a lot wrong with them. But if I can find the spark that inspired people to want to make this thing, I can groove with that.
Right.
Because one of the genres I know best is old school blaxploitation. And those folks
Mhm.
usually had no budget. They
Right.
usually didn't know what they were doing. They just were excited, maybe had some speed, and they went out and made it. But they made some really enjoyable stuff.
No, they
And
absolutely did.
stuff that's worth watching. I grew up watching Mystery Science Theater 3000, so you got all these B movies, and some of them they're just boring and terrible, but some of them they're terrible but in the right way. So it ain't got to be perfect for me to dig it. Is that something you can share with me and with
Yeah,
the audience? Like, will I be able to like link
I
that for
could
people to
ask for
see?
permission. Yeah, I'm sure. I've been
Okay.
trying to get her to release it for a long time, and I think so. We were able to find some distribution channels. I don't think she's ever explored them, but I could definitely ask, and I don't think she'd have a problem with it.
Okay, good. Because that's one of the things I like to do is bone up on the material of the people that I'm going to be interviewing.
Got
And
it.
fortunately for me, I saw the Duppy Man walks at the film festival. So I had the most important thing we're going to talk about. And I get why that's not more widely available right now because it's still on the film festival circuit. You have to keep it restricted. But I like to show people something if they're interested in the artists that we're talking to.
The Duffy Man's Walk, we're actually gearing up to do a public release of it here, maybe in like September, October-ish. Use the Halloween season to get some legs behind it. But that's something that we're definitely talking about doing now. But the Delgum, I could probably get you. Don't Go Home, She Knows I could get you for sure. And I'm going to release that publicly on YouTube here probably in the next month. So I'll give you an advance of some of these that you could use for your viewers.
That'd be great. And Don't Go Home, She Knows. So you directed, but you also wrote that one, right?
Yes. I'm a writer
So
by
it,
trade. Directing is something I do so that other people don't impede on my vision. You know?
you bake it into the script so people can't
Right.
argue with you about it.
Yeah.
I like
But
it.
Don't Go Home, She Knows is a story about a cheater, basically, who can't get on with past relationships because his wife committed suicide. There's some foreshadowing that we didn't get the days to shoot it, but in the script, you get to see it in flashbacks. So at their anniversary dinner, his wife has recently had a miscarriage, but at the dinner restaurant, one of his female friends comes and confronts him at that moment. Wife leaves, goes home. She's overcome with grief. She kills herself. Flash forward years later, he's trying to get on with other relationships, but he can't because every time he does, his wife's spirit intervenes. You got to see it. I'll actually send it to you because I'll send you the trailer and some other stuff. But the whole idea is that I think the tagline was a life of infidelity leads to an afterlife of revenge. But that was basically the story. And it's kind of creepy, kind of eerie, but not a lot of dialogue. And it's another kind of one of those visually driven stories.
I saw the trailer for it. It left me wanting to know what else we got going on here. What's going to happen? What does all this mean? I did pick up on some of what you mentioned, though. That's good. The trailer was effective. But we talked about writing what you know, life experience of this and that. Did you have a real life inspiration for what you wrote here, or was this just an interesting story that popped in your head?
So Don't Go Home, She Knows. I've never had anything like that happen to me.
Well, good.
But the idea behind it is you can't take it with you. You know what I mean? And the idea behind it was you can't take it with you because he was so selfish in life. He thought he would always have this type of ability to womanize and to just have everything he wanted at all times. But when you betray people in certain ways, some of that you carry with you. You remember when we were little, we would run through the fields and you'd end up with all those little stickers on your socks? That's kind of the idea, is nothing comes without consequences. All contact has some type of transference. There's some kind of theory in physics that like anytime two things engage, there's transference of some sort. This was my idea of playing with that. And the transference that he gave being the dog that he was to her, it wasn't something he could live without paying the price for. That transference stayed with him, and that's where the idea came from.
Pretty deep, but universal,
Yeah.
because men around the world and throughout history might have done things like this. It is
Mhm.
allegedly it's happened.
And women too. It's kind of like the jilted lover thing taken to the extreme.
Yep. And then a ghost story.
Right.
People like ghost stories,
I've
which takes
found
it.
the quickest way to willful suspension of disbelief is the things that we are afraid of, because we don't know everything that we're afraid of. So if you can get the hook in them and get them to follow you down the rabbit hole, fear can come in a lot of different ways, physical, emotional. If you're a young writer or director, content creator, and you're exploring genres to work with, comedy is hard, buddy. And it does not travel well. Like what's funny in Cleveland is not funny in Los Angeles. You know what I'm saying? Romance, twice as hard as comedy, but sci-fi and horror, they're good vehicles for the willful suspension of disbelief. And the first thing a writer should want to do is give you a roller coaster ride, in my opinion. And that comes with the willful suspension of disbelief. So if I can play on your fears, if I can play on anxiety, if I can play on your imagination of the things out in the world or in the universe, those are fertile ground for stories that could be about anything or anybody rather than romance, which always has to be about the cute guy and the hot chick and the bar or the diner. They really get pigeonholed and plugged into certain theatrical and narrative elements. But sci-fi, horror, dark comedy, you can play with anything and anybody.
Yeah, I guess you're right, aren't you? Because I remember seeing back in about the mid-aughts a German teenage comedy sex romp zombie movie. And even though, I mean, I speak a little bit of German, but not near enough to keep up with those people. And their senses of humor are much more blunt.
Mm,
They tend to not be as nuanced. I mean, they can deliver a good joke. It's not going to be Norm Macdonald. It's going to be more like a Dumb and Dumber, like you had mentioned.
yeah.
But the movie still worked because it had parts in it that I recognized. I could appreciate what they were doing. And then I got to see what those other little parts of how they tell a story and how they portray characters in a film that helped me understand, okay, so this is how Germans do this. And it was an enriching experience. Okay, I get you. But the horror helped me get in the door to understand what's going on. So Don't Go Home, She Knows. How long did that take to make?
We shot 2 days and then it was in post for like 3 months. The whole thing is, I think it's 15 minutes, 54 seconds, but it only took 2 days to shoot. We shot at my apartment, we shot at my friend's house, and the rest of it was basically just in my apartment. The whole thing cost $1,200, and
That's
that's
pretty impressive.
gas, food, everything. It was, again, guerrilla warfare filmmaking. Basically, every background actor that I knew that could act, I called them up like, hey, you want to be in this? Oh, yeah, is there a script? Yeah, but don't worry about it because there's not that much dialogue. And then again, it became a visual exercise. But since we made it, we were on Amazon for 2 years as a short film. We were with Reveal for like 2 years. We were with Nightmare Reel for like a year. And now we're in South Asia for 10 years with Gola Films in 20 different languages. So that little film had legs that long. I can't wait to see the type of response that the Duffy Man gets, because it's a far better piece of work, both artistically and technically. But the success of Don't Go Home, She Knows really is what broke us from being John Crow Films to being John Crow Creative, because we realized even though we're trying to make stuff you don't normally see, people want to see it. It was outside of the conventional norms of, I mean, it's a horror short, but the story itself, you don't see a lot of stuff like it. And that really helped us. And we were surprised the legs it had. And that's really what put the fire underneath us to start doing bigger things. We've always been ambitious, but that was the one that said to us, again, just proved we weren't frauds. And every time you know you're not a fraud, it makes you that much more excited to try to move to the next level.
That's cool, dude. I didn't know about all the exposure that short of yours has gotten. I'm glad to hear it. That's really good. So when back in the day, a joke might be that, I suck in the US, but I'm huge in France, or like they love me in Japan. So you could say that in South Korea. Greg Fox.
Yeah, we don't have we don't have like gargantuan number of views, but we got like 2,600 in India. We got like another, I think altogether it doesn't get a ton of views, not the numbers that I'm getting, but it was been out there for so long. We've just kind of just washed our hands of it. Like, we're not going to really chase it down. If you want it, you can have it, because what it did on its own was enough to bring attention to us to say that, you know what, this would give it to the public now and just let it be out there. So when people do Google us, that's something that they can find and watch for free potentially wherever they are. So it's kind of like being our brand ambassador out there in the world.